Let's see if we are live. I don't have my phone to check, but I assume that it is on. Okay. Again, this is a test of the script that I've written for my keynote speech. Thank you for having me. I am humbled to be here. And I would like to start by thanking Marissa Royval and the New Mexico Archeological Council. I also want to posthumously thank Reggie Wiseman and acknowledge his passing. I met him over the phone. Nothing fancy like live now, right? His spirit led me as I went through my journey through Blackton, to Blackton and through. Over the phone, he told me what he had found on Isaac Jones's land. We geeked out over names like Mac Taylor and Matty Moore. If he inspired others in person like he inspired me over the phone, we can all rejoice because he has entered his promised land. I had just started researching Blackton and had very little insight. Reggie Wiseman opened my eyes to the region and how it worked. Also, he was the first person to take my call. And as a graduate student, that's very important. I have since written a new history of Blackton and introduced a new frontier thesis. Blackton, New Mexico was a township, a scheme that lasted about 30 years. Many believed that Blackton was simply abandoned. However, my research uncovered new evidence that the scheme to build generational wealth, Blackton, continued to exist throughout the 20th century in other forms, generating wealth for generations. Reggie undergirded my work developing the notion of an Afro frontier. Reggie anchored my imagination in the ground like a tent stake. In Clinton Ragsdale's tent on his land, his sovereign land. Blacktonites protected their success. Spoiler alert, by dissipating as a physical town, but continuing to exist behind a corporate veil. I had always assumed Blackton was had a dynamic history, even though nowhere was this dynamism reflected. Reggie Wiseman confirmed my hypothesis, and even more so, his energy and excitement gave me permission to commit to further development of the Afro Frontier thesis, which brings me here today. Now, what credibility do I have? I mean, considering I did get a D plus in African American history. I can tell you that story later. But I want to go to the beginning of my college career. I wasn't prepared for college. Just say that. I went to class every day though, but I was only there to play football. But I didn't miss a day of class because I liked class. Um, but this here is a person on a horse outside of Compton College. Person on a horse. No, the sign of a person on a horse outside of Compton College with a red uh, mark through, meaning don't ride your horse. Who are they talking to? Who are they talking to? The summer of 2020 began with racial violence similar to the assaults perpetuated during the summer of 1919, a period often referred to as Red Summer. Black people on horseback, born and raised in Compton, was a vivid show of anti-racist force. June 9, 2020, black cowboys and cowgirls from Compton graced the pages of the New York Times under the headlines evoking history black cowboys take to the streets. For people under for people who grew up in Hub City, it was more of our reality. This is Main Street, Compton, 1920. And this is Main Street, Compton, 2020, 100 years later. I've decided to put the goods up front. This is boom times. This is the roaring 20s. I've decided to put it up front because a lot of times in my presentations, by the time I get to boom times, people have tuned me out. So I'm going to let you tune in to the good parts, and then the rest of the presentation will be more so about correcting the record. This right here is just putting it on record. So we'll start it with December 31st, 1919. The Roswell Daily Record reported will pool acreage. What they talking about? Who they talking about? The Blackton people are making final arrangements to pool their land. And when it is all in, they expect to have in excess of 10,000 acres. This land is to be put in a Roswell bank and kept there until some drilling company comes along with an acceptable proposition. Hmm. 1920. A lot was going on in 1920. For example, por ejemplo, this is a letter from Ruth Loomis Skeen, who was writing from Artesia, New Mexico, talking about Blackton in 1920. Writing to whom? W.E.B. Du Bois and the Crisis magazine, a place for which Blacktonites had been published in their magazine as early as 7 years prior. 1920, what else happened? The official plat of Blackton in 1920. In the winter of 1920. By the summer, boom times were on their way. We'll drill at Blackton, 1920. The Roswell Daily Record, September 1st, 1920, reported Blackton location made. The location for the deep test well at Blackton, south of this city, has just been made. This well will be drilled a quarter of a mile west of Blackton, and the derrick is now under construction. The well will be put down by a California syndicate represented here by Vern Lincoln. A rotary rig will be used to go the first 1,000 feet. And excellent progress is expected. 1921, you had Blacktomites continuing to progress. This is Duran Heron, who entered the Roaring Twenties landowning. Now, this is the part where the twist, this is the plot twist. Why would Blacktomites sell their church? Well, this is also the 1920s where churches were being burned down to the ground. Churches were being burned to the ground. How do they know? How did they know to sell their church? 1923, 1924, this is what it looked like. A free lecture on, quote, Americanism will be given at the Tabernacle. All right? Tonight at 7:30 o'clock. Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, realm of what? New Mexico. They had a realm in New Mexico. If you look at the bottom, the bottom under Fred E. Wankin, what was he? An attorney, a Mason, and a supposed Christian from Gainesville. I guess he was from Gainesville. This is December 11, 1924. New Mexico had been infested with white supremacist thought patterns. And then in 1925, Du Bois is contacting Clinton Rigsdale in Dexter, New Mexico, talking about two books. Why would Du Bois be talking to Clinton Ragsdale or Clinton Ragsdale talking to Du Bois? Interesting, huh? 1926, quitclaim deed to the Eubank family from Ella and Frank Boyer, which 40 acres. We will see that later as I present. But I want to start by dispelling every myth that begins with a Boyer narrative. Okay, so let's all read this together. I don't want to hurt nobody's feelings, so I'm just going to go ahead and just read it. Centenarian dies. Henry Boyer, who is the father of Frank Boyer, aged 100 years and 3 years, died at the home of his son, Henry Boyer Jr., on South Kansas Street. Yesterday morning, at 10 o'clock, Henry Boyer was born in Hancock County, Georgia on October 29th, 1822, on the plantation of Elias Boyer. His mother was Aggie Boyer, she being a slave who was born in Africa and brought to America by the early enslavers or slaveholders. He was married, he being Henry Boyer, was married to Hester Hill. And from this union, there are several children surviving him. Also, oh wait. Okay, so who are his children? Four sons. John Henry, John, wait, four sons. John Henry Jr., Robert S., and Frank. Also one daughter, Miss M.V. Johnson. He also leaves 38 grandchildren and 12 great grandchildren. He was a member of the African Baptist Church, ABC, having joined them in 1875. Funeral service will be held tomorrow afternoon at 2:30 o'clock from the Colored Baptist Church with Reverend Prophet in charge of, I think it's cut off, of same and burial will be at South Park. South Park. You gotta steal our jobs. Now, 1927. This is still Blackdom going strong in Roswell and in Blackdom. They have a Juneteenth in 1927. Oil test near Blackdom. In 1928, which means Blackdom is still booming before the bust, right? The bust, the Great Depression, right? Mitty Moore pleads guilty. See, Mitty is still a part of this Blackdom narrative in 1929. And in 1930, post the start of the Great Depression, post the crash, colored folks of Roswell to celebrate here. Where did they celebrate? And we can read it, but I ain't gonna do all that. It's Roswell. Now, what does that have to do with Lucky Brand jeans and the Compton Cowboys and Cowgirls? Well, what does it have to do with it? It has to do with that sign. See, some of the Compton Cowboys and girls are familial or family members of Blackdomites. Boom. You didn't know that, huh? See? Learn something new every day. The Wagner family, in particular. The Afro-Frontier thesis. Migrating from one Afro-Frontier space like Blackdom to occupy other places. Like Southern California and Harlem, Afro-Frontierists engaged America's roaring 20s. Black cowboys and girls continue to maintain a vibrant culture amongst themselves. A historical narrative sickness has concealed a brief period at the turn of the 20th century. When black people preserve their internal structures behind the Du Boisian veil of double consciousness and institution. Fundamental among them all was a notion of Ethiopia, right? Remember Henry Boyer? Henry Boyer, and he joined the church in 1875, the ABC, the African Baptist Church. Well, what is that African part? That's the Ethiopianism part. You see this echoed throughout the so-called North American continent in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And that's the context for Blackdom. See Guatemala? This one here, I won't read. I've read it in other ones, but just realize that black people in Pennsylvania in 1898, after the Plessy decision, said we only want our kids to learn German, and we're gonna build a German society in Pennsylvania. Say what now? Yeah. Okay, so just a few years later, El Paso Herald, September 10. Blackdom started as an inherited idea of 19th century Afrotopia. The idea of blackdom was refined within black institutions as part of the perpetual movement of black colonization. In 1903, 13 black men formed the Blackdom Town Site Company and were engaged by the 1896 Plessy decision. Okay, I'm going to keep echoing that. On Thursday, September 10, 1903, the El Paso Herald reported, Santa Fe News, grasshoppers have destroyed the crops of the Picadilles Indians. Negro town site chartered. What town site? A colony of Southern Negroes today incorporated the Blackdom Town Site Company with a capitalization of 100,000. Hear me. 100,000 is what, 3 million, 3.5 million back then? Wee. But no, I think it's really 10,000, but it just depends on how you read it, and I think they read it the way they read it. Blah, blah, blah. Town of Blackdom in Chavez County, the headquarters of the company, are located at Roswell. See? Roswell and Blackdom, Compton and Long Beach. According to the law of the land, black people were equally human and lawfully allowed to separate from others, which created opportunity in Mexico's northern frontier, in part due to federal laws that prohibited Jim Crow laws to fully take hold. Considering New Mexico was a territory where federal laws applied, black people recognized opportunity between New Mexicans racism and no Jim Crow law enforcement, at least until statehood. Blackdom was a real place that started with an inherited idea located in the southeastern section of the New Mexico territory. The Afro-Frontier town was part of a black colonization movement that operated on a continuum influenced by ministers, military men, and black Freemasons. Blackdomites were industrious Negroes who set out to build an exclusive all-black municipality and succeeded in less than 20 years. I have uncovered new primary source materials that shapes Blackdom's newly discovered third decade while challenging New Mexico's tricultural narrative. After the Plessy decision in 1896 established a separate but equal legal doctrine, black institutions evolved to take advantage by encouraging a separate and equal response. Blackdomites were industrious Negroes who set out to build an exclusive all-black municipality and succeeded in less than 20 years. Please take a moment to orient yourself to the physical space and use Google Maps to get directions. Blackdom, New Mexico was a township scheme that lasted about 30 years. Many believe that Blackdom was simply abandoned but abandoned in the 1920s. However, New evidence shows that the scheme to build generational wealth, blackdom, continued to exist throughout the 20th century in other forms. Okay, this is a map, a county map of who currently owns, with a layover of homesteads in the orange. And the Heron homesteads are at the bottom of that triangle. At the top of that triangle is the Roswell Correctional Center. So now you can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about. Now, right there where the Heron homesteads are, right in the middle where that orange line is on the R, that's where a Nike missile site is currently. This is what it looks like when you're to make it to Promised Land. If you wanted to get to the original Blackton, okay, you would go down that same road, that yellow brick road, that you take or took to get to the correctional center, and there is a gate about 3 miles down the road. The correctional facility is about 5 miles. And that gate is owned by a private person, a billionaire, but that gate right there would be the way in which all of us could venture out into the original Blackton Town Square. And on the right is state of New Mexico owned land. So the state owns that land, but not that gate. It's a long story, right? But those gates will set black people free. Let my people go. Blackdom was a real place that started with an inherited idea and inherited land. Where do you find the historical marker, though? I don't get it. It don't make sense. But I don't think it was meant to make sense. I think it was just to mark time and space. The Afro-frontier town manifested at the turn of the 20th century for African descendants under the conditions of American blackness. The idea for Blackdom developed throughout the 19th century. In the 20th century, although Blackdom existed as a town for a brief moment, in the span of history, self-determination, how to achieve it, were exemplified in the experiment, most notably about this new narrative of Blackdom historical agents, such as Blackdom's 13 co-founders have replaced the old narrative of a singular Moses-like figure. Francis Frank Marion Boyer, for example, was understood as the only founder. In the new narrative, Frank is an important part of an intersectional blackness that solidified into a various Chavez County, New Mexico institutions. Blackdom was home to a school, church, house, office building, a pumping plant, and the home of New Mexico's only black oil company. Protecting their success meant dissipating as a physical town, but continuing to exist behind a corporate veil. Now, the evidence for the new Afro-frontier thesis of Blackdom comes from a Sunday morning article in the Las Cruces Sun News, March 30, 1947. Frank Boyer, I need some water. It's 30 minutes. So. Frank Boyer was interviewed 2 years before his passing. This story has never been fully told or contextualized until now. Frank's story Reoriented to Mexico's northern frontier, one observes him as part of a cohort of black ministers, military personnel, and black Freemasons who colonized as part of the transmogrification of indigenous spaces until it was the American West. Okay, this is Boyer, like in his narrative. I've split it up into 18 paragraphs. I only want to talk about one so we can continue dispelling a singular myth. Okay, so we talked about Henry Boyer and Aggie Boyer. Now we're going to talk about Frank Boyer and the myths around him. After emancipation, his family continued to live on the farm of the Boyer family. Their former owners, and Boyer is proud of the fact that relationship between the white and Negro residents of that section of Georgia always has been good. There has never been a lynching within the borders of the county. He says, who's he? Frank. Frank who? Frank Boyer. This is what it looks like out there right now. Sad. This is what conceals Blackdom's history. During Blackdom's boom times in December of 1919, Blackdom Oil Company shifted town business from a regenerative agricultural community to a more extractive model. The appearance of abandonment was deliberate because of the scheme's success and the rise of the Pioneer Clan Chapter number 15 circa 1924. Significant to the black and ambitious Blackton town site was a proof of concept in an Afro-frontier town on how to deliver on the promise of God's sovereignty, going back to notions of Ethiopia and Ethiopianism. In 1900, black people totaled less than 200 in Chavez County, and most of them were represented in this scheme. In practice, Blackdomites pooled land to build a 10,000 person all-black district, Chocolate City, a black municipality, and contrary to popular narrative, Blackdomites succeeded. At the core of their movement was the exploitation of land through the homestead process. From the state of Washington to South Carolina, Blackdomites advertised Afrotopia in hundreds of media outlets, including those of the Associated Press. On September 9th, 1903, Santa Fe, New Mexico reported Blackton Town Site Company and the Articles of Incorporation and names of 13 men and their intentions. 13 co-founders back. Boyer couldn't do it by himself. And back to Isaac Jones and Reggie. Right? This is all I had in front of me. And Reggie gave me a little bit more context for understanding the region and how it worked. Isaac Jones, Blackton Town Site Company's first vice president, began his homestead in April of 1903. He appeared to be the first to do so. There are many actions that were taken by Blackdomites at the time, but Isaac Jones appears to be the most courageous of them all. In 1905, Isaac Jones became the first Blackdomite co-founder to complete a homestead. The basic process took 3 to 10 years. Looking at the homestead record does not show a connection with Blackdom, though, and is the reason why I call the first decade the lost years. Notice the highlighted portion says no sir, and that was in reference to it being a part of a town, his land. In 1909, after minimal participation in the colonization scheme, Blackdom, the townsite scheme, was revived as a way to mitigate the impact of New Mexico's impending statehood and the shift from federal legal jurisdiction to local ex-Confederate power, so-called jurisprudence. Ella Boyer, a member of the Negro Order of the Eastern Star, the Prince Hall Order of the Eastern Star is a Masonic appended body affiliate with Prince Hall Freemasonry. Ella was very dynamic, and if you look, well, let's just go back to her land. Let's say her land right there. That's her patent and desert entry. It started in 1909 and ended in 1918. And right adjacent to the bottom right corner is Blackdom's 40 acres. She has 4 times as much land as Blackdom's 40 acres. But she could also be the space. Anyway, I could tell you the whole story of how it would work. So, from 1903 to 1909, you saw the development of Blackdom all the way to advertising in Indiana. Advertising in Nebraska, Norfolk, advertising Blackdom Townsite Company, 10,000, not 100,000. It says 10,000, but I can show you why that discrepancy is there. Beatrice, okay, Beatrice what? Nebraska. 1903, Blackdom Townsite Company. So these Blackdomites were not planned. Kearney, Nebraska. Why are they in Nebraska? Why? Why are they in Nebraska? Does anyone know? Blackdom's elite owned land, but owning land wasn't enough to realize their Afrotopic dreams. In Chavez County, Blackdom was a small enclave of land-owning black people. Blackdomites needed a collective action to deliver on the promise of their intersection and the ascension into Afrotopia. During Blackdom's revival after 1909, Blackdom included the significant striving of black women as they began participating in the homestead process more fully. Mattie Moore, Panisha Russell, and Ella Boyer were a few who chose to engage the whole world as part of Blackdom's homestead class. Ella had 10 kids with Frank. You see that? Ella had 10 kids, and that's Daniel Keys, and so that's more family. And we can go on. Nebraska State Journal. Tuesday morning, June 6, 1911. Nebraska. Why Nebraska, huh? What they talking about in Nebraska? Oh, y'all don't know. Y'all didn't know that Blackdom had a HBCU called the Blackdom Normal Industrial and Theological College, and it was in Roswell. Y'all didn't know that. I did, though. Nah, just playing with you. Yeah, right there. Read it and weep. Okay, I'm just making a big deal out of this. But yeah, realize Blackdomites did everything that they set out to do in their incorporation papers. Everything, including the college that they said they wanted to build, the schools that they wanted to build, the pumping house. Yeah, they succeeded, is my point. Wichita Daily. Wichita what? Kansas. Boom. I'm going to let you go ahead and read that. I'm going to give it. Nah, you can go back and pause it maybe. Do I want to read this? I got 20 minutes left. I'm trying to get us to 1920. You're just going to have to read that later. I've read it in other videos. You have to read it later. All right. See, December 1911. Blackdom was still a big deal. 10,000. What are they talking about? This is 1911, 1912. What is happening in 1912? Titanic. And what are they talking about? Blackton, Dexter, post office. Kansas, Iola. They're talking about recruitment to Blackton in 1911, 1912. Bartlesville. Oklahoma. Where Guthrie is, where that article is. Oh, this article, I wanted to highlight the point where that they were not just going to Blackton, they were going to places like Canada. If you look right below where I have that highlighted portion, it said that they were also going to Canada. So Blackton was a lot closer than Canada, right? This right here is the Topeka Plain Dealer. Oh, we know what's up with that. Kansas. Colored people have established. So Blackton was well known just in black circles, especially in Blackton betterment circles. Right? This is what betterment is about. And you can pause it and read it later. Or look at my Prezi. I try to get to 1920. I only got a few minutes left. So El Paso Herald, 1913. What are they talking about? Postmaster James Eubank at Blackton. El Paso Herald. What are they talking about? What year is that? What year is that? 1914. They're talking about missing sheep in January of 1914. All right. This is revival into boom times. See how I gotta skip a whole lot in order for me to